Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As Martha mentioned, my task today is to talk about linkages between this conference, this Innovation Summit, and the Forefront Atlantic Conference. And I want to warmly congratulate the government and Martha and Tom and the others who have put this excellent meeting together. The whole purpose of Forefront Atlantic is precisely to stimulate conversations and discussions of this kind. So that's great that we've done this and that you've put it all together. I'm going to begin with a story. This is a story about Marty, Freddie, and Jackie, three old lags from the Middle Ages who have a lot to teach us about innovation. In 1517, Martin Luther, who is Marty in our story, nailed his 95 Theses to the door of the Castle Church in Wittenberg. And as you all know, these ideas exploded the orthodoxy of the day and started the Protestant Reformation, and the consequences of that are still with us today. Well, the Pope and the bishops weren't too happy with Marty, so they hounded him without mercy. But luckily for Marty, Frederick the Wise, the Elector of Saxony, Freddie in our little story, brought Marty into his castle and gave him close protection for a couple of years while he translated the Bible into German. But it wasn't until Jackie came along in 1553 that the revolution really took hold. Jackie, of course, is John or Johannes Gutenberg, who, with the help of financial backers, invented the printing press. Marty's writings could now be printed in their thousands. Before Jackie, making a Bible was highly labor-intensive. A single Bible cost as much as a fine city house, and it was in Latin. After Jackie, the cost fell to 3 days' wages for a working man, and it was in the local dialect. Suddenly, everybody who wanted a Bible could have one, and the Protestant Reformation went from a puff of smoke to a wild conflagration that consumed Europe for 100 years. Now, what is the message for us gathered here in Halifax in 2013? The message is this: for any society to have successful innovation, you need three things. You need educated people with new ideas like Marty, the thinker. You need entrepreneurs like Jackie to convert the idea into something that people want and will pay money for. And you need strategies for embracing and nurturing the thinker and then financing the entrepreneur. And these strategies are the analogy to Freddie, the infrastructure guy. Well, that's how you create an innovative society. But what if there are other societies out there that want to compete with you? Consider these numbers: 100, 50, 7, and 1. $100 is the hourly wage for a top-rated welder at Fort McMurray. It's $50 an hour elsewhere in North America. It's $7 per hour in Mexico, and it is $1 per hour in India. And the resulting products are identical. So what should we do here in Nova Scotia in the face of these facts? Well, we have two choices. We can either figure out a way to do welding better and faster through innovation and productivity, or we can give up welding and go on and do something else. Now, the Marty, Freddie, and Jackie story about innovation comes from the Governor-General of Canada, who gave the keynote address at the first of our three Forefront conferences, and he'll be with us once again in the third and final conference taking place here in Halifax on May 30. The welding story, which is about productivity, i.e. output per unit of cost, comes from Mike Asher, the CEO of Irving Oil, who gave us these figures at the same conference as the Governor General. So let me talk for a minute about the Forefront Conference. The world is at a pivot point. It's driven by three key economic factors. Number one, globalization, the economic gravity shift to Asia and other emerging markets, and the demographics of aging, which affect all of us in Western economies. So where does Atlantic Canada fit with these three matters? Well, we lag Canadian innovation and productivity levels that are in turn lower than many OECD countries, and yet we have a high wage economy, and that makes it pretty tough to be globally competitive. Our trade is mostly concentrated in countries and regions like the US and the EU that are in the slow lane of global economic growth. And finally, our region's demographics, we all know, are the most challenging of any in Canada. So what's the conclusion? Well, the conclusion is that we have to be proactive in reshaping ourselves to expand our potential, or else we risk being reactively reshaped by global trends. And the Forefront Atlantic Conference is a forward-looking, business-led conference to address these issues. It's focused on identifying our competitive advantages here in Atlantic Canada and enhancing the value of our products and services that we would like to sell around the world. In short, it's about mobilizing for change and competing differently to achieve success in the new global economy. And speaking frankly, Atlantic Canada business has been slow to move on this file. Instead, we have defaulted too much to governments, and then we've complained when they have failed to act. Now, of course, there are world-class exceptions to all of that. There are big companies like Irving, McInnes, Clearwater, Oxford Frozen Foods, Fortis, and there are similar smaller ones like Radiant 6 and Acadian Sea Plants. But you know, we don't have enough of either of these, and our wonderfully talented young people have to go down the road for work, and most of those who do are lost forever. So, to prepare for our upcoming Forefront Conference, we set up 5 expert panels on innovation and productivity, on talent, on going global or marketing, on access to capital, and on government processes. Now, since our topic today is innovation, let me focus on that panel first. Under Stephen Hartland's leadership, he's the Assistant Vice President of Industry Relations at Dalhousie. This group on innovation and productivity has produced a lot of recommendations that lie at the heart of the Innovation Summit today. And the central point that they are making for discussion at our upcoming conference is that we have a well-populated and fairly robust ecosystem in Atlantic Canada for innovation and productivity, but we still lag the rest of Canada, and why? It's mainly because too many of our businesses are unaware of the vital need for continuous innovation. What we need to do is to create the time and space for more ideation, which is the process of creating new ideas. We have a small population in Atlantic Canada. It's widely dispersed. And if we don't have a central hub to enable creative talent to come together, we have a serious problem. And we need such a hub in Atlantic Canada. We've had lots of discussion about that yesterday, in particular, with Eric Grimson and the chap from Harvard. What's his name? I'm sorry? He was the chap from Harvard. I'm thinking of Tom Jenkins, of course, from OpenText, who was, from Waterloo, who was a presenter at our first Forefront Conference a couple of years ago. A couple of really excellent examples of a hub are, of course, the Digital Media Zone, or DMZ, at Ryerson University, and Communitech, which we heard all about in Waterloo. And why? Because they both bring together entrepreneurs, academic institutions and multinational corporations, and they're pretty proficient in creating new startup companies. And they're a major reason why students stay after graduation. You can think of this as Freddie, the infrastructure guy, building a big sandbox in his castle so that Marty, the ideas guy, can dream about new sandcastles, and Jackie, the entrepreneur, can start building them by the dozens. The Innovation and Productivity Group is recommending many other steps apart from a hub, and those steps fall into three categories. First of all, increase collaboration and alignment between universities and industries in R&D. And I recognize that I'm plowing a lot of old ground here because these themes have come forward yesterday and today. And you can think of this collaboration as helping Freddie, the infrastructure guy, and Jackie, the entrepreneur, to play nicely together. Number two, help the private sector understand better the need for innovation and come to know the many ecosystems that are even now available to them. This is Freddie, the infrastructure guy, helping Jackie, the entrepreneur, make a better printing press. Number three, more innovation in government activities. This is, if you like, Jackie, the entrepreneur, turning around and helping Freddie, the infrastructure guy, to improve his infrastructure so that he can help more guys like Jackie become better entrepreneurs. So I'm going to go into a little depth on these three themes and flesh out some of the specific ideas on innovation and productivity that Stephen and his panel are putting forward. Under the heading of R&D collaboration between industry and universities, here are some thoughts. The Forefront Leadership will create a list of, and by the way, the Forefront Leadership, I'm talking just purely about the business people here, because the Forefront Conference is a business conference. Of course, government academics are welcome, but it's essentially a business-related conference. That leadership will create a list of actionable items on how businesses can invest in innovation and productivity. The private sector will invest in university research in areas that are relevant to business, and universities will leverage these investments with governments to build their capacity to meet the private sector's research challenges. Under the heading of helping the private sector learn about innovation, a couple of ideas. The Springboard Network will visit the top 300 companies in Atlantic Canada in 1 year. Those 300 being the ones that could grow through increased innovation and productivity. And Springboard will also work with the Counsel agencies in Ottawa to provide information and education to the private sector in Atlantic Canada. Regional chambers of commerce will set up a private sector university joint council on innovation. And our provincial governments and chambers of commerce will develop a sustained communications plan on the importance of innovation. And finally, under the heading of more innovation in government activities, provincial governments will align their procurement policies with their economic development agendas. And this includes pilot projects to set aside a small percentage of government spending in procurement for innovative ideas that come out of companies here in Atlantic Canada. Provincial governments will increase support for graduate students in areas that align with their economic development priorities. There, meaning the government's economic development priorities. As part of funding to Atlantic Canadian universities, our provincial governments should review and apply best practices in intellectual property policies, who owns what and how it gets deployed. We heard again yesterday about that topic. All right, so that's the innovation and productivity panel and some of the discussion, some of the recommendations that they'll be putting forward for discussion. Let me turn quickly to talent. Mike Asher, who is the CEO of Irving Oil, and his working group on talent note a couple of things. They say that our region lacks the resources and skilled people necessary to compete globally, and because of that, we need a uniquely aggressive approach to talent development. On the people side, we are losing our young people, and therefore we need to have policies and programs that better match our people with opportunities throughout the region. Interestingly, they make the point that developing and keeping talent requires a lot more than just programs to develop skills. It does require that, but there's more. We need social development programs for vulnerable neighborhoods and schools. We need health and wellness programs for a region where the problems of disease and obesity lead the nation. And a constant theme throughout the forefront conferences, we need a laser focus on literacy and numeracy in the K through 12 education system. More specifically, in education and work experience, they have a number of recommendations: increasing partnerships between employers on the one hand and schools and universities on the other, to tell young people about possible career paths, because all the evidence shows that private sector experiential learning through co-ops, work placements, and apprenticeships has a huge payoff. They recommend expanding existing successful programs such as DAL, the Pathways, UNB's Wallace McCain Institute, and so on. And the Going Global panel recommends 4 promising industries or industry sectors for special attention, those being defense, security and aerospace, information and communications technology, oceans technology, and education and training, which are areas where we have natural advantages here in Atlantic Canada. There's also an access to capital panel, which talks about the need for better equity tax credits and the need for combining our securities commissions. That won't come as a surprise, to facilitate more public listings. So I'm going to conclude with a challenge. Innovation and productivity and all of these related topics are not about Nova Scotia. Now, I realize that this conference is organized by Nova Scotia, and as a former politician, believe me, I know how politics can easily get in the way of thinking beyond your own jurisdiction. But here's the truth. Nova Scotia can't do it alone. We're too small, and we're running out of room because we have no cash to spare. We're losing people, we're losing political clout, and we're losing economic power. So here's my challenge. Let future conferences on innovation and any other business topic be Atlantic-wide. We need to expand our vision and our ambitions beyond Nova Scotia. We need to embrace this fast-changing world, so let's start in our own backyard. It'll take courage from our workers, from our businesses, and most of all, from our government leaders. But we did it 150 years ago in the age of sail, when we beat the world and created a lot of wealth, and we can do it again now if we put our minds to it. So thank you very much.